What scientific fact scares the absolute shit out of you? Scientific literature's conclusion on Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative diseases, in general, is that the diseases start decades before the first obvious symptoms and that we need to treat them at this stage. When you exhibit obvious symptoms, it's too late, your brain is already mush. If you get diagnosed with Alzheimer's at 65, you had the disease since your early 40s at least. And you experienced very mild symptoms but didn't notice them. And your brain fought like hell to compensate for the deficit. When you get diagnosed, your brain is already very severely damaged and will never recover from the deficit. What are the very mild symptoms one would have in their 40s? Looking back at my dad's symptoms, some examples in his case was forgetting our address and having to ask me what it was while he was on the phone with someone, getting irrationally angry over little things. One time he got very angry with me that I was playing with a laser with the family cat. He was convinced I was going to blind the cat, and just generally very angry/short fuse, whereas before he was overall a very even-keeled person. I read somewhere that extreme irritability that seems to come from nowhere can be one of the earliest symptoms. Well, I think my boss is experiencing this as we speak tbh. He's been impossible to communicate with for quite a while now, even with meaningless stuff, plus in the past 2 years his wife left him, his right hand quit because she couldn't take his stress anymore, and he recently fired half of the team. I really don't know what's going on his mind. We had a giant fight not too long ago where I lost my shit due to how ridiculous the situation was, and I screamed at him, "What the fuck are you doing?" Look at the drama out of nowhere from basically nothing, and now other workers can't even disagree with his opinion, when their job is to find problems and fix them equals disagree with his opinion. Concerning the fact that your body can have advancing cancer and you wouldn't know it sometimes. Father-in-law's brother was walking through his kitchen and he fainted and hit his head on the counter. He was rushed to the hospital and they ran tests, and he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer and his body was already in the endgame. He was dead within 2 months of diagnosis. That shit terrifies me, and it can happen to anyone. Pancreatic cancer is pretty much one of the worst you can get because there are no signs until it's too late. It's the rabies of cancer. My dad had pancreatic cancer. He lost a ton of weight last year between Christmas and Easter. He kept being stubborn and going to the hospital saying something wasn't right, but they couldn't find anything after testing. Thought it was a digestive issue or a million other things. Cancer scan showed nothing at the big NYC hospital. A week later he was fed up again, went to our smaller local hospital and they did a biopsy. The cancer mass was just starting to grow at the biopsy site. Did the Whipple procedure, chemo every other week from July to January. Things are looking better. As of now, it's gone, but they're going to be doing scans every 6 months. It's scary to think if he wasn't so insistent of what would have happened. Even if it was a few weeks. My mom complained because of his insistence of getting checked out for months, and the tests, and then chemo was starting right during summer and vacations. She wasn't supportive at all and wanted to move things around to better fit her schedule. Anyway, we're lucky, so very aware we're lucky. Even if you know something's not right, it's crazy how long it took him to get a diagnosis even with knowing something wasn't right. Our white blood cells are fighting cancer cells on the daily. If everyone lived forever, we would all eventually get cancer. Statistical fact. Your cells are just gonna split weird eventually and mutate. Asterisk mutate just the right way. They have random mutations pretty much every time they divide, but once a few very specific mutations come together you have cancer. The fact that we can just get a blood clot and die and not realize anything was up. The human body has so many ways of just suddenly dying, and it's terrifying. When my friend started studying medicine, she said she's surprised we're not dead yet because she's constantly learning about so many ways and things that can kill people so easily. I've backed out of a lot of fist fights as I've gotten older. I've also stopped going out to bars and getting shit-faced. My reasons are that I've got a good job, and if I get arrested, I'll lose that and be unhireable in my field, and my family had a friend of a family friend who punched a guy outside of a bar in our city and knocked him backwards. Hit his head on the ground and died on the spot. The guy he punched had wealthy parents and he got sued into oblivion on top of a 15-year sentence. His life is effectively over. My point is, a mild bonk on the head can kill you instantly. Be the bigger man. Unless it's self-defense, walk away. Don't risk your life or your career over words, because while the body can recover from some remarkable injuries, the littlest things can kill you like that. This also happened to a highly decorated Army Ranger years back. He comes home to Alabama to his wife, only to run into a few drunken regulars at the bar where she works. He accidentally kills one of the drunks, and is sent to a federal penitentiary for involuntary manslaughter for 7 years. Paroled years later, he hitches a ride home on an airplane that happens to be full of the worst criminals in the whole penal system. Unfortunately, these borderline supervillains manage to take over the plane, and it falls on Poe to ensure they don't get away. I read the first sentence and thought, is this Con Air? Ha ha. I don't remember what it was called, but there was an event in the 1800s caused by solar activity where telegraphs operated on their own without power and I think caused minor damage. Should such a solar event happen again, it would destroy all of our internet network capabilities and other electrical gear. Anyone know what I'm referring to? Edit, Carrington event. Thanks for the links. I would be interested to know if we would be as badly affected as people initially thought. A couple decades ago, sure, technology was extremely fragile and slight power fluctuations would fry everything, but these days I don't know if that's still the case. Bearing in mind that the bulk of the issues would come from the mains power grid and telephone lines picking up voltage differentials over massive distances. Most comms these days uses fiber rather than copper, so that is not as big of an issue. A lot of tech these days is also power filtered, or runs via an isolated transformer that would likely pop first before toasting everything else. Smaller devices like phones and laptops are unlikely to be big enough to have enough voltage variance across them to cause any real damage. There would be disruption, sure, but I don't think it would be as cataclysmic as people used to think it would be. I would say it would be a disaster rather than a mere disruption, but definitely not cataclysmic. Modern electric grids in most countries have multiple redundancies to prevent any one thing from frying everything, but those safeguards all going off at once will take a significant amount of money and manpower to repair, and many will be shit out of luck until they are. Always keep 3 months of food and a way to make potable water on hand, people. You're one solar flare away from being stuck in the 17th century for a few weeks. When the atom bomb was being created, the leading scientists associated with the project at the time had to calculate the flammability of the Earth's atmosphere in order to ensure that detonating the bomb would not cause the atmosphere to combust. At the time when the first atom bomb was detonated, these scientists still had not answered this question, meaning that we legitimately just crossed our fingers and hoped we wouldn't set the fucking planet on fire. Humans are stupid. Edit, it turns out that this is slightly wrong. The calculations were finalized before the bomb was detonated, but the reporter who covered the event was not aware of this and had overheard a joke made by one of the scientists to place bets on whether the world burns, or something to that effect. The reporter ended up with the false information that it was possible for the atmosphere to combust, which was later claimed in an article. Thanks to all the people who let me know of this issue with my post.